What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and you're probably aware that the latest special surrounding Doctor Who has aired and it has brought about a nuclear level response from the audience. The difference between what the fans want in their media opposed to what corporations want to push has never been more different. And from this latest special, we can definitively state that this has never been more true. So let's talk about Doctor Who's special and how Disney has sunk their claws into the property now as well. As for footage, I'll just use games that I've been playing and anything with magic in it. Cool? Alright, let's begin. What started this video for me was when one of my best friends messaged me after the special had aired. I was busy working on my previous video at the time. He told me the Doctor Who special was woke propaganda and that even his wife was losing her mind over how pandering it was. All I gotta say is that it's nice to see people who might not exactly be up to date on these things feeling the way that I do. It's validating in a way, if you will. The entire special is just pandering to an insane degree, featuring all the hallmarks of things audiences have grown distasteful towards in the last few years. Male characters are ridiculed and thrown aside, while female and trans characters are celebrated at every turn. It's not like Doctor Who hasn't had progressive themes before, it has, that's true. But I think the difference here is that while you can absolutely push progressive values, it needs to be massaged into a product so it doesn't become lecturing. One of my favorite things ever is Mass Effect, which is by today's standards technically woke. It has plenty of women in power and people of color, it pushes tons of progressive themes. But Mass Effect at least doesn't ruin or sideline the male characters to only show favor to female ones. There's an equal and realistic amount of people in power from both men and women throughout that trilogy. So when I say you can make something progressive and still be beloved and showered in praise, I mean it. Mass Effect is the gold standard of that. It respects everyone and doesn't treat white men as problematic only. But in Doctor Who's case, it's riddled with current day nonsense. There's plenty of moments throughout the special where the Doctor, who is now played by David Tennant in the special, is ridiculed for his appearance. At one point, the Doctor even states they were a brilliant woman, but now they look like this. And it's meant to be funny, cause the character has gone from being Jodie Whittaker to a boring old white man. Oh boy, don't you love current day nonsense. And we get plenty of virtue signaling moments where our white male protagonist stands still while he's lectured to. Like this one part where the female and trans characters tell the beloved Doctor he knows nothing and it's a shame that he's not a woman anymore. As if the Doctor being female over male somehow changes what their brain contains or the thoughts that are currently in there. If the Doctor can look like anyone regardless of gender or skin color, then the Doctor being male or female wouldn't have any differing effects on their mental state. And it's extra weird hearing one of the characters in the special who talks down to the Doctor agreeing with this sentiment when they are trans, who is a man who is now a woman, so by this standard that this special is applying here, the trans character would fall into the same category of inept pathetic mindset since they are like the Doctor as well. So in a way, the writers of Doctor Who are basically dunking on both their prized possession here and the Doctor as well. But if you told them that, they'll get angry even though it's true. We also get more nonsense where the Doctor is called male presenting, as if the audience hadn't had enough talking down to already. And don't forget when the Doctor is lectured into asking for the pronouns of a literal creature. Because I don't know about you, but if I were hypothetically to meet some alien monster in person, my first instinct wouldn't be to shoot it or run away, but of course I would stand there and ask for its preferred pronouns. This entire special reeks of the message, and it's no wonder people are so angry about it. On Rotten Tomatoes, the special has 100% from critics with a very honest low score from audiences. And I guarantee you that 100% is simply because none of those reviewers would dare rate something low that pushes identity politics. Because they know if they did, they would be excommunicated and eaten alive by their echo chambers for not thinking absolutely identical to the hive mind that they associate with. What's very interesting to me is that this level of woke nonsense has gone Super Saiyan levels within this special, and it turns out there's a few reasons for it. To start, Doctor Who, when it came to streaming anyway, never really had a place to call home. It would jump from platform to platform, but now Disney has acquired the rights to stream the show exclusively. And if there's anything people can praise about the special is at the very least that the sets and special effects do look good. And that's because not only has Disney acquired the rights to streaming, they also financed the special as well. So this is a long way of saying that Disney had a direct hand in creating this woke cocktail of a special for audiences to suffer through. And none of that surprises me, knowing how absolutely hellbent Disney has become in pushing the mind virus. You got apologists like this one Twitter user who said that the hate towards Disney is exhausting, then proceeds to confirm why that hate is justified. I mean, yeah, they're a megacorp with tons of terrible practices, and they have advocated for things like the cleansing of people within certain demographics, but just ignore all of that and let's just focus on the products here, okay? Yeah, we know Disney advocated for camps in China while filming the live-action Mulan, but ignore that, dear viewer. Don't look at that, it's not relevant. Disney is the victim here, even though they use sweatshops to make their products as well. And let's not forget how they've pandered in the past, like when they made Miles Morales into Thor and had him unironically say, "My Odin's fade because he's black and his Mjolnir hammer has spray paint on it." Because all black people illegally spray paint things according to Disney Marvel. Just ignore all of that and let's just focus on the products, people. That's not an agenda, okay? There's nothing weird or pandering going on here. The problem is all of you. You're crazy, and this mega billion-dollar corporation are the victims here. Hopefully people know that's sarcasm, but you never know these days. But in Disney's case at least, the rejection of their content has been hurting their bottom line. And even though Disney is publicly traded, the actual decisions for that company's actions fall on their board of directors. And when we look at the latest special from Doctor Who, it got around 5 million views, which may sound good, but it isn't. It's actually down to half of what the previous anniversary special hit. So to say the show has a dwindling audience would be an understatement. So does that mean we won? Has Doctor Who's woke agenda been defeated? Well, yes, but actually no. Let me explain. Disney, for example, is its own company. As far as we know anyway, the American government doesn't own or control Disney. Joe Biden can't just call up CEO Bob Iger and say, "I want a Dumbo 2. Joe, we're not making a Dumbo 2. The previous one flopped. I like his big ears. Joe, we're not making Dumbo. I don't know where I am. But when it comes to Doctor Who, the show uniquely falls into a convenient loophole in the grand design of things. You see, the BBC, no, not that BBC, the British Broadcast Corporation is actually owned and operated by the British government. What this means is that shows like Doctor Who are actually financed by the people who live in Britain through the magical power of taxes. So if you look at this latest special and you live in the UK and go, "Who's funding this nonsense?" Well, you are, actually, sorry to tell you. The monthly and yearly taxes you pay to your government are used to finance slop like this. So while in Disney's case by rejecting what they make could lead to those things not being made in the future, I mean Willow for example did exactly what Doctor Who is doing here, which is, put some chicks in it, make them lame and gay, and people didn't watch it. And it got cancelled and pulled because it wasn't making any money. Doctor Who, unfortunately, is conveniently supported by its government, which means even if nobody were to watch it, the show would still exist anyway. This loophole Doctor Who finds itself in puts it in a powerful position where it can be used as propaganda to push concepts onto its population. And this can't perpetually keep happening because as long as people live in the UK and, pay their taxes in order to live there, then this propaganda will just keep existing forever. It creates a self-replenishing cycle of woke nonsense that effectively can never be eliminated as long as human beings pay their taxes. This was probably the most dire realization I had about all of this while making this video. Doctor Who and the rest of the nonsense the BBC pushes can and will continue to push the message, for as long as the UK and its people exist basically. So really the only way we can stop Doctor Who and its woke nonsense would kind of only be achieved if either a giant meteor specifically hit the UK directly, which would of course kill millions and pretty much doom the planet to extinction, or people stop paying their taxes and leave the UK, which is never going to happen. Because I wager most of the people living there don't even know that their taxes are paying for nonsense like this to begin with. Doctor Who has essentially found a loophole in the culture war because capitalism and the rejection of product can't really destroy it. The only way to stop Doctor Who, dear viewer, is if Britain just imploded suddenly. So that's interesting, I guess, to realize that no matter what we say or do in this very specific case with this show, it can't be stopped. However, it can be rejected and dunked on, which is thankfully what's happening. But this special is just tone deaf because it's weirdly misogynistic as well. Think about it, if we had the same scene where the trans character told the Doctor it's a shame they're not a woman, but they replaced it with Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor and had the same line, but it said, "It's a shame you're not a man anymore," the woke weirdos would start convulsing with virtue levels of hate. It's funny how I sometimes read comments on my videos and people go, you're just blowing this out of proportion. There isn't a targeted hate campaign towards men, and then state propaganda like this comes out and I get to tell those people that I told you so. Men are absolutely unfairly targeted and attacked for simply existing. You could be the most virtuous and kind man this world has ever known, and there's going to be hordes of indoctrinated people who will hate you for simply existing. I always find it bizarre when shows or movies preach acceptance, yet they never take their own advice when it comes to the male demographic. This massive existing group of people who largely are responsible for the world that they exist in. It's really ironic that you got these feminists working at places like Disney or the BBC using electricity and internet, which are predominantly maintained by men drinking their coffees, which are shipped across the ocean and delivered in trucks, also mostly by men, and sit in buildings built by men as well. And that they can sit there and say that the world doesn't need men. Unreal, dude. If all the men disappeared tomorrow, the entire planet would plunge into chaos. Not to mention your precious internet and things you use like Twitter or YouTube or Google were all founded by and created by men as well. So whenever I see something pushing an anti-man narrative, I immediately toss that opinion in the bin and laugh. Cause without men, none of this shit exists, and places like Disney, who apparently has a hand in Doctor Who now for example, has been learning for years now what happens when you reject the male audience. You end up losing billions and all your brands fall into apathetic states of varying levels. The rejection of men has got to be one of the most moronic agendas of the mind virus to me. And if any man out there accepts or advocates for that or agrees that men are all trash, those guys should be put in a rocket ship built by feminists and then launched into space. But since no men had a hand in making that ship, it'll probably fall apart a minute after it launched and the male feminists would just burn alive in the Earth's atmosphere. Oh well, either way, nothing of value would be lost if I'm being honest with you. But you know your brand is tarnished when this special was only able to gain 1 million more viewers than Jodie Whittaker's final episode as the Doctor. Who, by the way, when she was the Doctor, the series fell into a ratings freefall. So what we're seeing here is the age-old endgame that keeps happening. Doctor Who, like Marvel, Star Wars, and others, are all chasing this modern audience. And yet all they're rewarded with is rejection and apathy by a tired consumer base. But if Doctor Who wants to chase the LGBT crowd only, that's within their power. But they shouldn't be mad if their ratings drop into the toilet since they're alienating the much larger audience for this woke nonsense. But I guess it's working when you got users like this person just openly pushing for more hate towards white men. Must be nice to know your insane racist views are totally accepted by corporations. Good lord, is our world twisted and backwards these days. Then you got this one article here that went semi-viral titled, "Doctor Who's first 60th anniversary special is a TERF's worst nightmare." By the way, in case you don't know, a TERF is a term used to identify someone who opposes things like gender identity. A very famous TERF would be J.K. Rowling, who made Harry Potter. The term is nonsense, but I figured you should know. Anyway, that article basically states that the entire special is a trans allegory and that it makes being trans what saves the world. Russell T Davies, who was considered essential to Doctor Who, was asked what he thinks about people not wanting gender ideology in their shows, to which he said, "Shame on you and good luck to you in your lonely lives." Gotta love it when creators just attack their audiences like this. If Doctor Who wasn't financed by an entire populace of people, statements like that would tank the show. But let's be real, the only reason Russell is able to say this and get away with it is simply because the show is paid by taxes, that's it. And what this special was is very on brand for today's media, which we call the old bait and switch. You make something with an established fan base by luring them in with something they like, David Tennant as a Doctor for example. Then once the viewers have been promised something they want to see, then you bait and switch and make the character no longer the star of the show. And now you got the views, and you get to push your message. It's exactly what Scott Pilgrim did recently too. Even TheGamer.com had an article titled recently, "More remakes need to do what Scott Pilgrim did." Basically, what The Gamer is getting at here is that they think the bait and switch is a great idea, because it allows for their politics and wants to be pushed. But like Doctor Who, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off was advertised as a classic retelling of the beloved series. But instead, Scott is sidelined in the opening episode and Ramona Flowers, his girlfriend, becomes the main character. The gamer says, and I quote, "It's awesome not just because it's a creative spin on an already much adapted series, but because it knows what was wrong with the original graphic novels. People have long rolled their eyes at Scott being the hero. Considering he's basically a bum who miraculously manages to finagle his way into a relationship with the much cooler Ramona Flowers. By beating up her exes on her behalf, this retelling centers women and previously overlooked queer characters and does it with skill and heart. There are so many more interesting ways to approach a franchise as established as Scott Pilgrim and franchises in general. By criticizing its own flaws in a somewhat meta way, Scott Pilgrim has impressed audiences in a way it couldn't have if it had just been a straight adaptation. I only wish more iconic series would have the courage to do what this show has done. But considering that it's financially safer to not take chances like this, it's likely Scott Pilgrim Takes Off will be a fairly unique case. What a shame, this is the first addition to a franchise to delight me so much in years," end quote. But that's just not true. The bait and switch has been happening for years now. On Netflix alone, Masters of the Universe also promoted itself as He-Man centric, only to pull the rug from underneath and make it about Teela. The same thing is with Doctor Who, and the reason why it happens is simple. It's because these creators know that if their true intentions were promoted, nobody would watch it. They want these stories to be contorted and transformed to fit their ideology. It's why they push these things within franchises with established fan bases already. Nobody would watch Scott Pilgrim Takes Off if it was promoted as throwing Scott out of the picture immediately, especially when the franchise is literally named after him, so they bait you in and then they switch it. Nobody would care about Doctor Who's special if it was still Jodie Whittaker. So the BBC decided, well, how do we get people to watch our special so that we can push our message effectively? I know, let's get the most popular doctor that fans love, who ironically is a straight white man, and then bait them in with that. And then when they're comfortable and have their guard down, we switch it up and voila. Message is sent, the views are secured. Even if again the Star Beasts only managed half of what they used to get, they probably still see it as a success anyway. We're in a time where many writers are unable to make something new, and corporations are willing to only push things based on established IP. So what we're getting here is ESG-filled nonsense masquerading behind franchises that we love, pushing stories that nobody would watch otherwise if they didn't have something already established to use as a vehicle. Doctor Who, Scott Pilgrim, He-Man, Spider-Man 2, The Last of Us, and so many more are all movies, games, and properties that use this tactic. They lure fans in, for example Spider-Man 2, only to say Miles is now the main Spider-Man, which most fans don't want. But now Insomniac got the sales and used that bait and switch to push their message. Many fans would not have bought The Last of Us Part 2 had they known that Joel would die. But they used deceptive marketing and literal fake scenarios in trailers to push a narrative that Joel was in scenes he wasn't actually in. Also, people would buy it, and once they did, they pull that old switch and voila. What you're seeing in Doctor Who is the gold standard of what these weirdos keep doing. I would say I'm disappointed, but that word has lost all meaning in the current meta that we're living in. This has become the new normal, and it's up to viewers like yourself to vote with your wallet and call these things out. Otherwise, you'll keep getting more nonsense like the Star Beast special and things like Scott Pilgrim. But as always, thanks for watching, dear viewer, and subscribe and like the video if you enjoyed it. Thanks to my patrons as always, and have a wonderful day. Keep resisting, and until then, I'll see you in the next one.